movement at this point in time. So I'm going to hand over to our sister, Dr. Bumi Biu, who will take over the question and answer section. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Bumi Biu.
The mood, the man, the mission, the mandate, the message, the medium, the moment. Thank you very much, Pastor Bakare, for your insightful and illuminating remarks. As you can imagine, there are quite a number of questions that our global audience want to ask you. We've crowdsourced questions. We started to do that since last week, and the questions are still coming in. You have touched on some of the questions that are going to be asked during your remarks, but I'm sure people want clarification and they want some plain speaking as well. So I'll go to the first question. Pastor Bakare, are you running as president in 2023? And if yes, what party ticket are you eyeing? I'm quoting verbatim. And will El-Rufai be your running mate?
Thank you very much for that question. I can only run in 2023 as a presidential candidate. I cannot run as president, if I listen to your question well. But by God's grace, as we have been meeting together with friends and leaders in our nation in the past few years, is looking much more like we will definitely be in the forefront of the battle for the salvation of our nation in 2023. If you're asking me a direct question, a direct answer will be yes. And if you're asking for what party, it was my privilege to move the motion for the emergence of APC, the motion for the merger between CPC, ACN, ANPP, and on February 6, 2013. I'd never been part of any other party apart from that. And by God's grace, that will be the party that I will seek opportunity to serve and to lead my nation. The last part of that question is, will El-Rufai be your running mate? At this stage, you cannot jump into that because you need to get a ticket first, and the circumstances that will produce a ticket would definitely yield to who the running mate will be. Fantastic. El-Rufai is one of the great leaders in our nation who is facing a lot of storms today, but at the same time done quite well in his own way, either as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and now as a two-term governor of Kaduna State. But to say who will be, let us not count our chicken until they are hatched. We must get the ticket. We must be the carrier of that ticket before we can settle who will be the running mate.
Next question is about security. And you've touched on this again, but again, I think clarification is needed. What do you consider responsible for the persistent insecurity in our land? And how do you think this can be tackled successfully?
Well, I can't go into all the details of our manifesto. By God's grace, we have produced one and we are fine-tuning it before it will be released to the public. But let me say to you, an idle man's brain is a devil's workshop. I like the way the Turkish people put that proverb. They say, Satan tempts every man, but an idle man tempts Satan. Most of our vast majority of young people that are jobless are the ones easily recruited by those who are plaguing our nation with kidnapping, with all kinds of terrorism. And if we are able, by God's grace, to get them engaged, to get them employed, to get them settled in their own environment, to become productive, you will soon see that those attacks will wane. And if we strongly, you have heard reports of our arms and ammunition getting into the hands of terrorists. If we build a formidable military that is strong and well-trained to tackle external aggression as well as join our police to tackle internal rebellion, we'll be able to stem the tide of this plague of terrorism, of kidnapping, of all kinds of affliction that are now producing what I call profit of crime to our young people, whose means of livelihood have been cut off and who are ready to die just in case they are killed. They are prepared to die, and they will rather die than not fight that way. We need to do a reorientation and provide those social benefits that will calm them down and get them engaged by the grace of God.
The Nigerians in diaspora want to know how you would recommend we make our voices count, since we are not permitted to vote at the present time.
Well, at this moment, they're not allowed to vote, but I did say, by the grace of God, we'll get a kind of a dialogue and agreement with those in the diaspora, that some of them, instead of just working from home, they will work for their nation, take time off to come here, and we will ensure that under our watch, by God's grace, just as is done every other nation in the world, America and others, it will be possible through our embassies to have Nigerians in the diaspora vote for their leaders. We just need to deploy technology and to find honest men. If you can have what you call INEC officers in 36 states of the Federation and a different local government, it's not difficult to have such INEC officials, just as we have military attaches in those embassies, to ensure that nations where we have diplomatic relations, our citizens can vote for their choice candidates, and in the future, it can come here also and be voted for.
How do you intend to recover our commonwealth that has been stolen over the years by corrupt political elite?
The truth of the matter is the recovery is an ongoing process. Past administrations have recovered, and unfortunately, some of it again was looted. But in the days to come, we are focusing on how to not just go back in the past and be looking for those who have done this or done that, but to begin to reactivate the areas that will increase or generate our national wealth. That's one. But anyone in the process of time that is found to have stolen and to have taken what does not belong to it will track it anywhere. America has a system today that whatever money you earn anywhere in the world, you pay taxes on them. If those funds are legitimate, that you have in your accounts abroad, nobody's after you. If you have earned your living and earned your wealth in a legitimate manner, nobody's after you. But if it's corrupt enrichment, those who swallow may have to vomit, but not necessarily clamping people into jails and increasing the capital vote for those who are in prison to feed them. We will get what belongs to Nigeria back, and we'll let you know that it is not allowed, or is not going to be the order of the day in the new Nigeria of our dream and of our vision.
It's been reported that the national grid collapsed for the third time this month. What is your plan to ensure 100% availability of electricity in Nigeria?
Those who have made such promises without getting on the seat have all the time ended up eating their words. There are experts who know exactly what is happening. We will engage not only those within the country and those outside, and we'll begin to restore. We are not going to have a situation hereafter where the national grid will collapse, or where we will have light today and not light tomorrow. We will find a way of spreading what we are going to do with electricity and how we are going to generate electricity in such a way that a place that is under construction today, or that city or that nation, will be focused upon to complete it before we jump onto another. And there are issues within electricity generation and electricity supply that are nothing but bottlenecks in generating electricity and supplying electricity to people. I lived in America. I lived in Britain. I'd never met the person supplying electricity other than I see their bill and I pay. Most of these things should not be handled by government anymore. We should get entrepreneurs, but again, bring laws that will not make our people vulnerable or just render our people to be taken advantage by those suppliers. If you get in the public sector, I beg your pardon, private sector involved, and for example, you say, Ikeja, we need light, and somebody is investing. He's the one generating, he's the one supplying, he's the one issuing bill, and he's the one that to which you pay your bill. You fast track electricity production and supply in different states of our nation. It's doable. It's been done by other nations. I know the names of my electric supplying company abroad by looking at their bill. I'd never visited their office, and they supply on time. It can be done. It's not rocket science. It can be done, but we have to take off the hands of the government more or less completely, except the regulations that our people are not taken advantage of and they are not robbed.
How do you think the role of the Office of the Citizen in Nigeria can be strengthened? Do you think this will require constitutional review?
Well, yes, partly, but also a serious reorientation of our people. The highest office in our land should be the office of the citizen, because sovereignty lies in their hand. Sovereignty belongs to them. And everyone in any office, as a governor, as a president, is a servant of the people, is there to serve the people. People must know that, and they must understand that during election, they use the politicians collecting what they call stomach infrastructure so as to enable the politicians to take advantage of them for the next 4 years, diverting funds and stealing like Alibaba and 40 thieves. That will stop when the citizens know how to say no to stomach infrastructure and know that the vote in their hand is the power they have to bring anyone into power and to remove anyone from power. Citizens must be reorientated so that they understand that the power lies in their hands until they delegate it to whoever is their governor, local government chairman, or whoever is their president.
So what specific steps would you take over 4 years to increase Nigeria's non-oil revenue base?
4 years is a short time in the life of any nation. But what has been done so far in focusing on agriculture is not just going to be on a particular location of the nation. Let me tell you that we have vast youth in this nation who can be deployed to produce food for us in such a way that the National Youth Service, instead of going to teach arithmetic and algebra and this and that, it can become a 2-year project where they are paid fully, not just taken advantage of. And they are part owners of the farms that they will establish. You will see in no time that we'll be able to feed our nation and be able to export food from our country. We cannot continue to rely on oil. Nations of the world are moving far away from it, and they're trying to do other things as source of energy, different from gas, different from oil, and we cannot stay in the world where we have electric vehicles that will not use oil in the future and just stay on this mono economy. We must diversify as fast as possible, and it begins with ensuring what I call the geo-economic restructuring of our nation. If you recall, in the golden eras of the region, you see the pyramids, the granite pyramids in the north. That was what built institutions like Ahmadu Bello University. You see rubber plantation and palm oil in the east. That was what built University of Nigeria in Nsukka. You see cocoa in the west and other manufacturing things that were embarked upon by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. That was what built the likes, the institutions like University of Ife. We need more, in fact, faster than geopolitical restructuring. We need geo-economic restructuring to ensure that what comes from a region will begin to sustain that region, and they pay tax to the center as was done before. Except we wake up and do that, We will not maximize the potentials of our youth, and will continue to rely on oil until it dries up. God forbid that that will be our portion.
Are you President Buhari's preferred candidate? If so, how would you handle the risk, potential risk to your candidacy from being hijacked by a cabal, as it seems that the president obviously admits that such a cabal, dangerous cabal exists?
Would you like to repeat that question so that I hear clearly?
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe I should break it up because it's like several rolled into one. So the first part of the question is, are you President Buhari's preferred candidate?
The only person who can answer that question is President Buhari himself. And I'm not sure he has revealed that yet. He has kept it on his chest. He had said he has one. And when the time comes, just as he did with the chairman of APC, he will come up with that. And until then, let us keep on hoping against hope and working so hard so that opportunity can meet preparation. Then there'll be a breakthrough.
So the second part of that question is, yes, we don't know who his preferred candidate is at this time. If you happen to be the preferred candidate, how would you manage the potential risk of your administration being hijacked by a so-called cabal within the Nigerian polity? Yeah.
I've never heard President Buhari say that. So I would not be right to be judging him on what I've not heard. I'm hearing from you now, there may be others, that as they say, everything, the buck ends on his table, because they are not going to blame any cabal in future. And I'm sure he's a wise man that he cannot say cabal making me do this. No, he has not said so. I've not heard it. And I'm close enough to know if he had said so or not. Maybe you heard it elsewhere. But it's like saying you're sleeping on duty. If you say cabal has hijacked your mandate, what will give that the right to that cabal, what they voted for? You are going to have inner circle of people. You are going to have your ministers. You are going to have people you're working with. And we understand that delegation without supervision is abandonment. We delegate and we ensure that what they're asked to do, they deliver. And you can make mistakes. Any human being, you are an expert in this field of human resources. You can make mistakes in appointing someone. The moment you know is not performing, the same grace that appoints him, the same grace will fire him, because we can't afford to just keep on and dragging this issue of cabal, no cabal. And let me tell you, 4 years in the life of a nation, 8 years in the life of a nation may not be enough to do all that is in your heart. But you ensure that by God's grace, succeeding generation, we continue to build on what you have done instead of what we have experienced in our nation many years past. A leader will get up and maybe his wife or the leader will do better life for rural women. And then another leader will get up and he'll say, well, I'm not going to continue better life for rural women. It's now rural life for better women. And instead of moving forward, we are marching backwards. We must continue to build on what others have accomplished, because government is a continuum.
What is your plan to ensure universal healthcare coverage for all Nigerians? The person who posted this question says, again, I can't confirm that statistic, that currently just about 5% of the population is covered under government's universal healthcare scheme. So they want to know, what is your plan to ensure universal coverage?
You know, most of the things that are loaded on the federal government should be released from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent or the residual. I will tell you, as I said in the course of my speech, but for the initiative of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, I probably would have died as a little child. But there were dispensaries, healthcare centers that we could go and that will be taken care of. That should be the responsibility of state, as much as possible also the local government, so that they can take care of their people. And we must ensure that we have strong states, strong center, and perhaps strong local government also. Now, what government will do to provide healthcare will be to invest in such facilities and institutions that can make our health hospitals and what the like, that can make them life-saving institutions and not where people go to die. Once those things are embarked upon, then the individual citizen, the vulnerable ones, will take care of those preventive things at medical centers that are financed by the government for the sake of people. For example, we are not a government at the Citadel Global Community Church. For more than 20 years, we have provided health care for our people on Sundays free of charge, even in our local domain. And outsiders are coming to take advantage of it. If we can do that as a church, as a nation with vast resources, we can do better with that. We call experts, and we would dwell more on preventive medicine and ensure that our people are living well, there's clean water. One borehole or two boreholes in my neighborhood decreased death in that neighborhood because we gave it to them free of charge, no one is paying us for anything. All those things will be factored into what we're going to do. And I will want to tell you, we have worked so far to ensure that when that opportunity presents itself, we'll hit the road running. We are not going to be trying to guess who will be where. As a matter of fact, the moment God gives us opportunity so to do, you are going to know who is going to be where, because there is a shadow cabinet already in the making.
You commented earlier in responding to a question that Nigeria needs to move away, like most oil-generating nations of the world, from oil-generated revenue. Following on from that, what is your plan for Nigeria's 4 state-owned refineries?
State-owned?
I'm reading the question.
Read it again.
What is your plan for Nigeria's 4 state-owned refineries? I think the person actually meant federal government owned, not necessarily state owned in that context.
Well, if I will be honest to my bones and answer you, the turnaround, the re-engineering that we have done to all the refineries that were once built by the military, especially in the days of the then General Buharis as commissioner for petroleum, they are now run down, and every attempt to try and rebuild them is produce nothing but losses. One man in our nation by the name of Dangote has built a refinery that our NNPC is also partnering with. We may have to move away from those things and let these things be private much more than government meddling up with what they cannot possibly deliver. And if it's going to be done by state at all, it's not going to be the mess we find ourselves in. There'll be probity, there'll be accountability, and you know exactly what comes in and what goes out. It's not going to be sort of imaginary figures that you just read from nowhere, and you know that there are institutions in our nation today that are nothing but breeding ground for deep-seated corruption. We know it, we shy away from it, but if an individual in our nation, if an individual corporation like Dangote Refinery can build what is about to be launched, then others can do same. They can do same. But beyond that, if the state is going to own, then it will have to be efficiently run. Otherwise, we cannot go by what we've been doing before and expect a different result. AA, Alcoholic Anonymous, call that insanity. To do the same thing again and again and expect a different result. We must tackle these issues from the root so that we know exactly where we are heading for.
How do you plan to control government spending? Government debt. How do you plan to control the government debt while maintaining appropriate spending on social and human infrastructure, health, education, etc.?
Well, thank you very much. You know, government generates fund only 3 ways. There's no other way. They don't sell, they don't buy. 1 is IGR, taxation. 2 is borrowing. 3 is printing. And if you print more than necessary, you cause unnecessary inflation in your country. as part of what we are going through now. So if our citizens are engaged, look at Lagos State, for example. Taxation in Lagos State is not the same as every other state. People are empowered, and those who are in charge know how to collect taxes without necessarily flogging people. IGR is poorly managed, and one of the areas we have to look into is ensuring that our IGR is perhaps the best area we're going to focus on. But you can't ask people to pay taxes if they're not empowered, if you're not created enabling environment for them to earn. It's after you have earned that you pay your taxes. Now, debts, it's I have to be careful with this statement, and I trust God to guide me. Borrowing is not wrong. I've borrowed from banks in my life, and by God's grace, every loan that has been structured that I've taken will be paid. In the past, I've borrowed money to do investment in real estate, sometimes run into billions. I'll borrow, and by the time I finish, I sell some, I retain some, I pay the bank. When you are borrowing money to pay salaries, something fundamentally is wrong. It's either you have an over-bloated government, people who are just sitting down not contributing so much. We need to have a lean and mean government, especially at the center. I always wonder, why do we have Ministry of Agriculture as a federal ministry when the federal government has no land? But it may be just to produce fertilizer and to help farmers. Wonderful. Why can't we streamline what it would do and then focus attention on that? Our ministries and our government is too large. Now, I'm not advocating that you throw people under the bus because they've been there. And remember, in the days of the military, part of the challenges we face today is that their appointments were terminated, the security of tenure was removed, and stealing began. Daylight stealing began in our ministries, and kickbacks and everything is gone worse from generation to generation, from administration to administration. If that is going to stop, those you think are no longer contributing to growth, you sit with them and you find a way of easing them out and giving them some capital, either it's gratuity or whatever it is, so that they can go and do something useful with their lives. You see, I love practical things. The Lord Jesus Christ, for example, who is the head of the church, and I'm not bringing religion into this, was a carpenter for 18 years before he started preaching. Paul, the apostle, was a tent maker. Therefore, we must engage those who had put their hands on the plow, who had made a success of one business or the other. We must find the best and the brightest who will contribute to our productivity rather than consuming the cake that we have not even properly baked. Our nation has been a nation of cake eaters. The next 16 administration must be cake bakers, and we must bake enough such that we are not paying overheads all the time, and but we are investing in what will generate public wealth. It's wonderful to do generational wealth for your family, for example, legacy wealth that you pass to your children, but time had come for us to create a public wealth that can help Nigerian children to be in school, that can feed our hungry, that can help the vulnerable amongst us, so that crime rate can drop in our nation. We just need to do that like fast. I'm not going to judge anyone because I'm not in their seat to know what they are borrowing and what they are borrowing for, but there are some things that are challenging to my head, and we are going to sit down and think through it. What we don't need to pay, we don't need to pay for it. And what we don't need to invest on, we are not going to invest on white elephant projects. We are going to be precise. With precision, we'll see what will generate wealth for our people and for our nation, and we pursue that. I look forward to being able to block some holes that we have already identified, even within the civil service and what have you, so that we stop bleeding from every sport in our nation.
Question is ancillary to the previous question that you just responded to, and you touched on. So you talked about, to paraphrase you, basically it's daylight stealing, financial and economic and banditry. And the person who sent in this question is actually concerned and wants to know how, as the 16th president, you intend to reorient or recreate our national culture, so that corruption is antithetical to what we're doing in Nigeria.
Those value systems begin from home. I will find it abominable to go and steal because of the way I was raised. Government cannot just one day begin to tell people, you must do this, you must do that. It must be all hands on deck, because parents are raising their children, teachers. In our schools, you see, honesty is the best policy. We are trained that way. Civic is taken out of school, more or less this day. History is not there anymore. When those things are restored and parents accept responsibilities, you will then find out that the family unit of any nation is the one that supplies raw materials in public and private sector. Those who are looting and stealing are ambassadors of their home. Having said that, however, majority of our laws, all the laws you have in the West, in Canada, in UK, in US, they are in Nigeria, but they are observed in British. And the good book says, when judgment is not speedily executed, the hearts of men are set in them to do evil. If we begin to enforce our laws, if somebody has stolen and you not only recover the wealth, you take him from being a governor or whatever it is, and is spending time in jail, and you find out that is not what, all of a sudden people will say, well, chances, choices, consequences. If you decide to steal, there's punishment for it. Look at America. You go and tamper with your taxes, it doesn't matter your level, the position you occupy, they will throw you into jail. You can't get away with this, so people find a way of distinguishing between tax avoidance and tax evasion. You can take advantage of those things, but if our laws are not implemented, they are not enforced, then corruption will continue to grow. Let me say this for the opportune time, not today, as I've said in the past. Corruption is not a new phenomenon in the world. In the days of Noah, if you have read the story of Noah, when the flood destroyed the whole earth, there were two evils that God saw that grieved him. It was corruption and violence. And at that time, it was not just treasuries that were being looted. Either men had become perverse, they have lost their value system, they were doing things that are not convenient, and God said, I will destroy the whole earth. And he found a man who was righteous, he saved his family. The corruption still came back into the world. God is looking for, our nation needs, not just God now, our nation needs those who are upright, men of integrity, men who roll up their sleeves and are not in government for what they can get, but for what they can give. What we have today are people looking for opportunity. They will do anything to secure power, only to go loot treasury to pay themselves back. When that stops, when we have men like George Washington, who said publicly, as I'm accepting this responsibility today, the state will pay me nothing. I fall back on my farm to sustain me other than the stationery or wherever you send me that I go. When you have selfless men begin to be interested in the affairs of a country, what you're going to get is you're going to have them using power for service and not for self.
How can Nigerians in the diaspora contribute to Project 16?
Well, in many ways. In a few days, some of you who are part of this process, you will get a manifesto to debate about and to put your insight into it, so that it's not one man calling the shot, it's a number of people owning a vision. A pioneering vision must become an empowering vision. Is when a pioneering vision empowers other people that you have a corporate vision. Corporate vision is not a statement of the world. It's a buy-in of others who say, yes, this is the way to move our nation. And many of you in the diaspora have succeeded so well that people like Joe Biden are engaging Nigerians in government. The same thing is going on in the UK. The same thing is going on in Canada. I was made to realize that if the Nigerian doctors and nurses we pull out of NHS in Great Britain, it will collapse. We have suffered too much from brain drain. People are coming back to add value and to contribute their quota and have a nation they can call their own nation. I look forward to it, including you and everyone looking at me today, you coming back home, because we are going to fix this nation by the grace of God.
What is your position on the separation of religion and the state, particularly as regards the use of government resources for religious pilgrimages?
Well, if you know President Buhari very well, that was one of the things he kicked against when he took over power. He refused to send or to deploy resources for people to go to Mecca or to go to Medina or to go to Jerusalem. Those are private things. If you want to go to Mecca and Medina, go at your expense, not the expense of the state. Yes, in order to make sure that our people do not suffer there, we can empower our embassies in such nations to ensure that Nigerians are protected when they are there. We can do that. By sponsoring you on pilgrimage, I think that died with previous administration. This administration kicked against it, and future administrations should stand on what has been done so that individuals can wear their faith like their wristwatch and sponsor themselves wherever they want to go. I've been in all those places that you call religious centers, but I've gone there for business, not for pilgrimage.
What would you do differently from the current administration as regards tackling the problem of insurgency, banditry, terrorism, violence, kidnapping across Nigeria?
What would I do?
What differently?
What would I do differently?
Yes. What would you do differently? Yes.
I've just told you that number one, we will ensure that nobody gets away with crime, because killing people, stealing and maiming and kidnapping and raping is crime. We will not allow it to stand, and by the grace of God, we will ensure that those who are sponsoring them or who are part of it will be brought to book, and that speedily. I want you to understand that all these things started little by little. They were not these fears at the beginning, but they're becoming like the serpent that you find in the Garden of Eden, who became the dragon in the book of Revelation. And it would take a dragon-like approach to put this dragon out of business, because I've sat in meetings in at least state levels where people are saying, our children looked up to us for inheritance. They know we're cattle herders and cattle owners, but today we don't own cattle. Our children know that they have no inheritance. They have taken to guns in order to have money, and they are making fast money out of it, except you can kill them. There's no way there's going to be peace. Now, instead of killing and destroying, we are going to engage them. I want to let you know that there are different camps in Nigeria where these people are. People are supporting them. They eat food. There must be a market where they are buying. These things are known, but we need to engage and not just fight the battle like we are fighting a regular war. We need to engage. We need to deploy intelligence in such a way that we can stem the tide of this evil before it consumes all of us. We are all afraid now, but we have to not be conquered by fear, to face that fear, to face where it's coming from, and be able to put an end to it by not only using the law enforcement agent, by not only using the military, but by engaging those who are behind it and those who are known as sponsors, and by bringing them to book.
Should you be elected the 16th president of Nigeria, what should Nigerians expect to see in terms of marked successes during the first 2 years of your term in office?
We are not going to wait for 2 years before you begin to know it. We are going to give you timelines of accomplishments that in 4 months you will see this, in 6 months you will see this, in 8 months you did this. By the time we hit 1 year or 2 years, Nigeria will rejoice. I won't say more than that now, because we have spent more than 15 years putting this together.
You supported PMB and the APC, which eventually brought Nigeria to this dire situation. How do you expect people to trust your judgment, knowing that you supported PMB and APC? And I'm quoting the question, sir, PMB lacked capacity and competence.
Well, you can say what you like about an individual. You have not sat on that seat to see the overwhelming challenges and situation of our country. Let me say this up front, that the president's job is not to do everything in the nation. Is to assemble the best and the brightest and to release them to go accomplish the things that was part of his vision or dream for his nation. I do not like to call people names because behind the scene, you don't even know what they go through as individual. This gentleman and officer sought power through 4 electoral cycles. And we quickly have forgotten. Yes, you can say what you expected, the change you envisioned, and the things you expected to be done had not been done. But why did we have to ask PDP to go? Why did we begin to cry? Why did I join those who are marching the streets? In the 16 years that they operated, we have forgotten. It seems we have what I call fecal memory, God forbid. This is the way we patronize the military. Every coup, Nigerians danced, only for the new person to do worse than before. In 2010, the Save Nigeria group issued what we call social contract, the minimum that Nigerians must demand from their leaders. And we are going to hold ourselves accountable that some of the things that were not done will be done properly in the days to come. If you look at the nations where you are now, they have gone through their own ups and downs too. If you look at American history, they've gone through their own ups and downs. I mean, would you put on the same pedestal all the American presidents, maybe Ronald Reagan, Bush, the Bush 1, Bush 2, and President Clinton, and put them on the same pedestal with some of the people? Go read American history. Go read. You continue to grow. What we need to do is to hold our leaders accountable and not just to fold our hands when we see that we are regressing instead of making progress. That's number one. Number two, it is so easy to be critical than to be correct. I will not beat my chest that I will do better until I do so. I know by God's grace, I've been trained and I'm still going through training. And there are others alongside with me that we are pondering over this nation nonstop on daily basis. But let's not begin to pull people down. Remember, it was when Nigerians were tired of the years of PDP that they brought in APC. And if there were things not expected or things that they expected that were not done, let us hope that the man who said is standing for new Nigeria is just a pioneer or pathway to that new Nigeria. The moment he's able to hand over to those who can make that a reality, it will be part of his legacy.
The last question I'm going to ask in the interest of time, and there are lots of questions, but our moderator has said at the beginning of this event that people's questions will be answered eventually. They should just continue to send them to the email address, or they'll be crowdsourced from the chat. And so this is the last question, sir. You have, over the years, you are known for talking about a people that can be a radical opposition to corruption. You've talked about the fact that we can win by righteousness. So this question is a concern for you from the person who's asking it. He says, sir, if you become president in a nation like Nigeria, will you still have time for God?
Would I still
have time for God?
That would be a disaster if I don't have time for God. The moment the fear of God is no longer in your life and his presence is not there, you're a disaster going somewhere to happen. Joseph never lost his affinity and a relationship with God as prime minister of Egypt. Daniel never lost his cutting-edge relationship with God as part and parcel of those who brought change to Babylon. We can maintain contact without contamination. Nigeria needs those who are radical opposition to corruption, men and women, boys and girls who choose to win by righteousness. That's what we have stood for. And by God's grace, there will be no place in our history that you can bring something from the past and say we committed a crime, we did this. You will not find it by the grace of God, because we are conscious of what the future holds, and we trust God to live by abiding principles of honesty and integrity. I continue to fear God, and I'll continue to have relationship with him. If he withdraws his presence from my life, it's a disaster. It is the presence of God that commands the miraculous. All the things you want to see. When one man called Samuel stood up, the Philistines ran back. By the presence of God in a nation, by the fear of God in a nation, you discover that people can live and become law-abiding. We are lawless because there's no fear of God. Churches are filled with people who live like saints on Sunday, and mosques are filled with people who live like saints on Friday, but from Monday till they go back to their churches and their mosques, they live like devils. We are no longer going to be submarine people. We are going to be people who are the same in private, in public, and it starts with the head. When you demonstrate it, when you model it, people will learn to follow. If a parent in the home do not question how their children are bringing resources into the home, then you know that they are encouraging and condoning evil. But if you know you can't take that home, the same way will be a minister who will declare his assets. You can be rest assured, I mentioned that the only person that I know of, maybe others happen, is the late Yaradua, who publicly declare his assets. Before we start anything, we will be like men like Papa in Ondo State. I've forgotten his name. The governor of Ondo State he was governor under UPN. His name just escaped my head. He declared his assets, the number of clothes he took into the office, and the number of clothes he took back. We need men like that who will say, this is what my assets are, and you cannot see a remarkable difference. Like those who went into government or those who came out of military and suddenly began to own banks as if they own that. We have taken advantage of our nation. We have raped this nation. It's time to restore the dignity of our country. Baba Ajase, Governor Ajase was the name I was trying, Michael Ajase was the name I was trying to remember. There are people who live above board, and we need them east, west, north, and south at every facet of our government life. When they know that it's not business as usual, they will line up.
Thank you, number 16. May Nigeria be a nation blessed with divinely ordained peace, progress, prosperity, and possibilities. And may your transition from pasturing the sheep to shepherding the nation be seamless and harmonious. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
You're most welcome. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bakare. And thank you so much, my sister, Dr. Bumi Biu. That was an engaging moment. Like I said earlier, I think I have to go back to school. This is too much for me to take in at one time. One thing I have learned